Welcome to this episode of Artist Tales, the podcast that features and celebrates artists from different walks of life. I'm Heather Martin, and I'm speaking with Robin Barr, a photographer who recently relocated to West Yorkshire. He photographs architecture, abstracts, and people. I first met Robin a number of years ago through London Independent Photography, which is a London-based photography group. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for coming on. It's great to have you.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about yourself, Robin.
I'm a man of a certain age. I'll be 64 shortly, and photography is my passion, but it's a hobby. But I invariably go out without my camera. I don't always take photographs. I'm always looking for the perfect photo opportunity. I moved in November 2020 from London Essex borders up to West Yorkshire, to a semi-rural location, village called Crag Vale. It's absolutely beautiful here. The countryside is wonderful. But what I miss, and what I'm looking forward to explore, are the local towns. The towns aren't too far away. That's Leeds, Manchester, Bradford, because I have a passion for architecture and taking photographs of buildings.
So great. So what brought you to West Yorkshire?
I love London. I've lived in London most of my life, but I fancied a complete change. My partner's family is from Yorkshire and felt like it was the next stage in our lives. We've got family here. It's a very good artistic community in this area as well. I'm still exploring. This is still early days yet, but it feels like the right move.
Yeah, because you're right near Hemden Bridge, aren't you?
Yes. Hemden Bridge is only about 3 miles away. Yes.
Yeah, because that's quite a centre for. Sorry, it's Hebden Bridge. I mispronounced it, so apologies.
That's okay.
Yeah, so that's quite well known for an artistic community, isn't it?
Yes, it's mainly painters and sculptors. There are photographers there, but I haven't actually joined any photographic groups in the area. There was mention a while back at LIP, London Independent Photography, that maybe I could start up the Yorkshire branch, but who knows? I don't know whether it was said in jest. Maybe it was, but why not? It's been an interesting time since the start of lockdown, with so many gatherings or online through Zoom with different photographic organisations, mainly LIP.
Yeah, I was going to get on to the pandemic and lockdown. Maybe you can talk about it now and maybe then get into your photography. But how have you found lockdown? I mean, I know a lot of people have found it challenging. I mean, how have you found it, and particularly when you're doing your photography?
Before I left London, I found it frustrating because I was about half an hour away from the centre of London by London Underground. And obviously nobody went on the Underground for most of last year. And so I missed going to exhibitions and galleries. I missed getting lost in London. What I like doing is going out with the camera and just getting lost down side streets and seeing where they lead me to, and finding buildings or urban abstracts that I feel might make a good photograph. So lockdown, I've missed out in that respect, but otherwise I've been doing a lot more reading. I've joined various presentations online. I'm okay. Lockdown hasn't treated me too badly, really.
And how about in West Yorkshire? I mean, you obviously moved partway through the pandemic to somewhere very different. I mean, you're very much, as you said, you're very much more rural now, compared to London, which is not. So, I mean, how has that been, particularly with lockdown? Because, moving in lockdown is probably a very different and perhaps surreal experience, really.
Oh, it felt very, very surreal, but I'm slowly exploring the area. We've only been here for a few months. My partner is more into hiking and loves walking in this countryside, and I go out for walks as well, but he prefers to go on longer walks than I do. But I'll find my feet, so to speak, and I'll start exploring soon once the situation with COVID improves a bit more.
And do you find moving to somewhere very different that, yes, you can get to Leeds and other metropolitan sort of areas, but, I know you, and I know particularly you're into architecture and sort of building abstracts. You're now very rural. So has that had an impact on your photography?
Yes, I even had to start up another Instagram account for myself, just with photographs of the area, basically. I have several Instagram accounts, probably far too many for one person. One's architecture, one's abstracts, one's people. But then I decided to create another one just for local scenes, basically, and things that I'm discovering in the area, which don't necessarily fall into any of the other titles. But that's not a problem.
What sorts of things are you finding?
The area is full of dry stone walls, some of which are probably several hundred years old. Dry stone walls and lots of gates to fields that are no longer being used as fields. And so I've been taking photographs of gates and walls and is it lichen or lichen? Lichen, I think it is, or lichen.
I think it is lichen.
Yeah, I'm taking photographs of lichen and the different colours and the different patterns. But I haven't been photographing as much as I have done in the past. But I think I'm saving myself for those metropolitan outings.
Yeah, so how did you get into photography initially?
You don't want me to hear this, but I can't really remember. I like the idea of creating images, but then things started to fall into place. I met a guy through a local gallery in East London who had a similar camera to me. I bought a camera. It was mainly for holiday snaps, basically. And he bought a similar camera to me, and we decided to go out photographing together. This was probably in about 2012, 2013, so it's quite recent. You showed me what you can produce out of with shots, basically. Showed me a different way of seeing. I mean, he's an artist, he paints, but he takes photographs so that he can paint from those photographs. And then he introduced me to Flickr. Are you familiar with Flickr?
Yes.
And so I've been on Flickr since 2014, and that coincided with me rediscovering brutalist architecture and the beauty of concrete. It all seemed to fall into place. So I started taking photographs of concrete and old buildings. And then through that, I was introduced to Instagram as well and various other hubs on Instagram which relate to architecture. A lot of my influences have come from online sites like Flickr and Instagram. And through that, I've got my own following as well. It's just evolved from there, basically. But also in 2013, I think it was, I happened to read a review in The Guardian of a photographer called Saul Leiter, a New York-based photographer who died. He's in his early 80s. I thought, I was reading the review and I was fascinated by the type of photographs he was taking, mainly street photographs, but very abstract. And so I started investigating him more and reading up about his work and going to various exhibitions that were of his work as well. So it all seemed to fall into place. I called myself No Great Hurry on Flickr, which was in recognition of the fact that he was never in any great hurry either. You know? There was a short video made of his life before he died called In No Great Hurry. So architecture and Saul Leiter, that's what's brought me to this point now, I think.
So you find that when you do your photography in no great hurry, there's that kind of your philosophy then?
Yes, because it frustrates my partner, but I go back to the same places more than once because I like seeing buildings in different light, different times of the day, in sun and in rain. And also, these days, I tend to have photographs on my camera cards, which I don't look at for ages, and eventually I look at them and think, oh, quite pleased with that, or not impressed with that at all. Yeah, maybe that's me, in no great hurry.
Yeah, no, I do quite like that. I think you also have an Instagram account called No Great Hurry, and I just like that philosophy personally.
Yes.
Yeah, and you also do art, abstract and people. And I know another thing you've been exploring more recently, which I've seen when we meet for the London Independent Photography, is double exposures. Tell me a bit more about how you've gotten into those areas as well.
Well, I've basically got two digital cameras. One is a Canon, which is about 12 years old now, and I started buying lenses for it, and that's quite an expensive business, buying new lenses. And I thought to myself, I don't want to fall into the trap where I buy really expensive lenses, or have to buy really expensive lenses every few months because of a different style of photography I've encountered. And also, they're starting to become very heavy as well. So if I went on holiday, I'd carry the camera plus a few lenses. And I thought, oh. So I bought myself an everyday lens. It was an 18-200 lens, which I started using. But then someone introduced me to a range of mirrorless cameras called the Fuji X100s. So I treated myself to a Fuji X100F, which is quite a small mirrorless camera, and it's got a fixed lens. And one of the things it does is takes in-camera double exposure photography, photographs. So I thought, I'll try that. And basically, I want to become more creative, and that's a way of me trying to be more creative by using double exposures. And
some of those are really quite interesting as well.
Thank you.
It seems like photography is a fairly recent thing you started, in the last, not even 10 years, really.
That's right, yes.
Yeah, so it sounds like you kind of fell into it.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering, kind of now what the role of it is. Is it just exploring your creativity? What is it that you really like about the photography?
I love seeing the creativity in other people. So over the past 18 months or so, because of Zoom and because of various, basically there's LIP, London Independent Photography, and they're a member of the Central London group and also the Crouch End group. And also each week I log into another group called Lenses of Croydon, who have different photographers presenting each week. I've really got into the creativity of other people and really love seeing how creative other people are. So I think because of that, my own photography has suffered in that I've taken less photographs. But I want to change that. I want to turn that, and I want to try and create, I was going to say unique photographs. Not sure if I can do unique, because someone said there's no such thing as a unique photograph. But I want to be more creative with my photography, basically. So I think over the next few months I will be experimenting more.
Yeah, I mean, I do find that. I mean, I've heard that before, that, nothing's really ever, truly unique, because I think we're all kind of influenced by other people. But I'm finding that probably, sounds very much like you, where I enjoy going to exhibitions, or I enjoy, going to Central London Independent Photography. And I've also gotten into a little bit the Lenses of Croydon. And you're right, it's very interesting to see what other people are doing. And sometimes it can plant seeds of, things to, maybe I'll try that, or, kind of makes you think about what you're doing, doesn't it?
Basically, what I enjoy most, though, is taking photographs of buildings, and not just facades, but looking up and seeing what patterns I can make, abstract patterns and shapes I can make from the photographs, but in one frame, things that people wouldn't necessarily see. But it's interesting, though, because these days, if you go to any built-up area in the Canary Wharf or Chelsea Harbour or what have you, and you start taking photographs of buildings, you'll get approached by security guards saying, you can't take these photographs. But I've also found that architects like to see how other people see their buildings and see shapes and patterns, and that photographers can obtain by just looking at work that they've designed. So I've had some positive comments from architects on Instagram in relation to some recent developments. I also, with regard to the security guards, once I tell them what I'm doing, they tend to normally accept it, and they're fine with it.
Yeah, no, I do find that as well. And it is frustrating. And I think partly it is places like Canary Wharf are no longer public areas. They're private property, which I know there's some discussion around kind of the privatization of public spaces. And that's a very good example. And you do get the security guards, particularly if you have a very nice camera, kind of approaching you, doing the wagging their finger saying you can't do that. And it is frustrating. But they are, as you say, can be quite reasonable as long, once you start explaining what you're doing.
Well, that's the nice thing about the Fuji, in that it's such a small camera. It looks like an old-fashioned camera, basically, and they wouldn't believe that you can get some really decent shots out of it. So that works well as well, taking a smaller camera to some of these locations.
I agree. I find that. You probably have touched on this a little bit, particularly with COVID and everything else. But what kind of challenges have you faced, or do you face with your photography?
I'm not very good at learning. I try, so much is available these days to people who want to take photographs, on YouTube or various other online systems. But I tend to learn a certain extent and think, I know that, then switch off, and without actually thinking what I've learned. I'm very slow when it comes to teaching myself.
What do you mean by learning?
Well, I still feel that sometimes I make silly mistakes when it comes to light, when it comes to resolution, when it comes to the settings. I prefer to use manual settings with the cameras. Now, I could use the automatic settings, but I feel as if I'm cheating. So whenever I can, I will use a manual setting. So there's times when I think to myself, I've got these settings right. I know what sort of photographs I want to take today or just now or what have you. And then you look at them in the viewfinder and think, they're rubbish. They're awful. So I suppose we're all learning. I'm not perfect, and I don't pretend that I am with my photography.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody's perfect, to be fair. and sometimes the imperfect photographs are oddly just as good as the so-called perfect photographs. Don't you think?
Isn't that strange? I mean, I can look at a photograph a long time after I've taken it, and a long time after I've discounted it. Then all of a sudden, actually, I quite like that.
I've done the same.
But also with sites like Flickr, I'd like to post a photograph that people will enjoy. And sometimes I really delay before putting photographs on. I think, oh, it won't be liked, it won't be liked. But then all of a sudden it is liked, and it gets some very positive responses. But then today I saw something earlier today, and I'm now questioning myself: is it actually important to get likes? It should be down to yourself. I saw a program earlier today about Vivian Mayer, and that it wasn't until after she died they discovered a container full of thousands and thousands of her negatives. And she took them for herself, not to please other people, but they're outstanding photographs.
Yeah, you've touched on something there, because I know I've struggled with that. And I think until quite recently, that's something that, you wanting to get the external approval, or, wanting to get recognized. But then I realized probably in the last few years, really what I'm, my photography is mine. I'm doing it for me. And if people enjoy it, great. But yeah, no, I've come to that. And I think I've really reevaluated why I do my photography and who I'm doing it for, really.
No, which is good, which is a good way of looking at it.
I agree. I'm just wondering with Flickr, whether there's an advantage, putting aside the likes, whether there's an advantage with something like Flickr or even Instagram, when people start commenting about your photograph, whether that is helpful. Do you find that helpful?
Oh, I do, yes.
In what way?
It's an interesting question, actually, because I do find it helpful, but I find it helpful for myself, really. I suppose it shows that I've done something, or I've composed a photograph that not just I like, that other people like as well, or created an image, which completely goes back on what I was talking about just a few minutes ago, where it's not important what people say.
But I'm just wondering, what type of comments you get. Is it more, hey, great, that's really good? Or do you get some kind of feedback or kind of, I say, constructive criticism? Or is it more, hey, we really like it, which in a way can be helpful, because, you're kind of, it's not completely, I know what you're saying of you doing it for yourself, but even sometimes the positive comments can be, okay, actually, it might reconfirm it's a good picture. But I'm just wondering whether you get kind of feedback of, maybe just a bit more apart from the, oh, this is really good, whether people kind of give a bit more detail?
People normally just comment when it's positive comments. I think people are probably too polite not to give really poor comments. Occasionally I do get poor comments, but normally I can understand where they're coming from. But I think it's difficult for people to be totally critical on your work on a site like that. I suppose in some ways it would be quite nice if I did get some poor comment as well as good comment, because not everybody would like my style. I was told by somebody a while back, I wanted to exhibit some photographs, some architectural photographs, and I had a specific idea as to what I wanted to exhibit. I showed these images to them, and they said, "Are you a graphic designer or are you a photographer? These are just graphic design rather." I thought, well, no, this is what I like creating. This is what I like doing with my camera. I'm not necessarily trying to take a good photograph. I'm just trying to take an image that I find appealing. That I always make a point of the lines always being correct and lining up with the corners or what have you. And that's me. That's not everybody's taste, but that's what I like doing.
And I think you've touched on something, particularly, when it comes to art, it is such a personal thing where not only for the photographer or for the artist, what you're creating is by extension yourself, and people who interact with your art may perceive it and interact with it differently, and they may or may not like it. And it can, I don't know about you, but I can sometimes find it disheartening when people say that. But I more recently, I try to remind myself, that's their opinion, even if it's more negative, and that's fine. And I think sometimes it's hard to say that or to remind yourself that. But I do struggle with, I remember it was one of the annual exhibitions for London independent photography, where one of the guys was saying, well, actually, you have to pitch it to the people who are judging or the people who are deciding which images are going in. And I find that very difficult, because for me, it's such a personal, like how I construct it and what I take pictures of is such a personal thing that I find it very hard then to try to pitch something. Or if somebody likes, street photography or a certain type of photography, I find that really difficult.
It's interesting going to an exhibition. I mean, talking briefly about exhibitions, I mean, I think it's wonderful now that lockdown is eased that we can go back to exhibitions, because I think it's so much better to see photographs or artwork on walls of galleries rather than just on Flickr or Instagram. If you think about Flickr or Instagram, people just look at your photographs just for seconds or split seconds in some cases. Whereas, if you go to an exhibition, then people do stand there and look and talk about images. My images won't always fit into exhibitions with lots of other diverse images, But that's the point, though, isn't it? We're independent photographers. We're creating what we want to create, and if we want to show it, then these are the images we want to show. I was talking to an artist years ago who created some really beautiful caricatures, beautiful artwork. He said, "Well, yeah, I do create these. I do like these. So I do create these, and they are popular." He said, "But I don't like them. They're not what I want to do, but they're what makes me money. I can make money out of them, but they're not. This is not why I started painting." So I think it's so important. If you're not relying on photography to support you financially, then you should do what you want. And if you want to show something, then you should show what you want to, not what someone else wants you to show.
I guess, there is always that tension, particularly if you make money out of your photography or whatever artwork you do. On one level, if you are making the money, there's a certain, potentially compromise. You have to compromise to make it, sellable. But you're right. I guess you and I both are, because we're not dependent on making money out of photography, it can be more down to what we want to take and what captures our eye.
But also something else that I've learned, because I'm always learning. I think we're all always learning. Is that if a photographer takes an individual image, then you shouldn't just judge the photographer on that sole image, because sometimes it could be part of a project. And then if you see the image as a part of that project and see the other images as well, then you can understand it. You can then read it as a photograph within a set number of photographs that are telling a story.
So within a context rather than...
Yes.
One last question before the end of the podcast. Do you have any kind of upcoming projects or things you want to start working on, or things you might want to explore with your photography?
Well, I want to go back to taking photographs of the urban environment, back to my abstract architecture roots, basically. But I want to try and be more creative, so they might involve double exposure, it might involve more ICM or intentional camera movement. But I want to explore the area. There's an organisation called the 20th Century Society in the UK, and I've offered to help them, to support them in the area. Their buildings are always at risk, so I've suggested that I be allowed to go and visit buildings at risk in Yorkshire and take photographs. So there might be a project coming up.
And one thing we haven't touched on, and sorry, probably last question now, is, I did mention that you do pictures of people as well. Does that fit in anywhere, or is that something you just kind of flirted with?
I'm a bit of a flirt, but but I have flirted with it, and I quite enjoy it. And it's very interesting, though, because I've discovered recently that, I've been taking photographs of artists at the Hebden Bridge Open Studios a few weeks ago. So I was taking photographs of some artists, and there's a few that I would like to take. But it's so important to build a rapport with the artists and not just go in cold and take snaps. I don't want to do that. The ones I've photographed so far tend to be people who I get on with very well, but there's a lot more people I haven't met yet, basically. So yes, it could be the start of a whole new project for this area, me photographing local artists. And then in that way, I get to know the local artistic community, and hopefully I can take photographs for them.
That sounds really interesting. And, if that does take off, I'm sure many of us would be interested in seeing more. I'd like to thank you, Robin. It's been really interesting chatting with you. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, thanks for the opportunity to take part in this podcast.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Artist Tales. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. Further information about the artist I spoke with is in the episode notes. Please rate and review this podcast on the apps and spread the word. You can get in touch by emailing artisttalespodcast@gmail.com. This podcast is on social media. Check the information in the episode notes. Hope you join me next episode